Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are Team SPaSM, and we are going to present to you our project called Teach Spark. I am Sarah Sexton, the team lead.
I'm Melissa Clare, lead programmer.
I'm Samuel Hassenwald, Quality Assurance.
And I'm Patrick Biat, document lead.
Our faculty advisor is Dr. Philip Yakuzinski, and our clients are with us in spirit today because they live in Seattle. They are Victor Quintero and Eric Hogan. So let me motivate the audience with why we're doing what we're doing. Esteemed colleagues and teachers and professors, have you ever found yourself asking these very difficult questions and you just didn't know where to turn? You want to find out a way to motivate students to take their future careers more seriously. There's a field trip to a company that is hiring and the students just aren't motivated enough to go. What do? How do you track the changes made by students in group projects without dictating what tools they use? How do you manage to provide students with acceptable course material and a good academic course of study with tight budget cuts and limited resources with professors? What do you do when you realize that your students are struggling throughout the entire quarter, but on the SEOIs, they say that it was easy? So if you have these kinds of questions, but they're too personal or too difficult to just ask your peers, we would like to introduce a website similar to the Stack Overflow website for asking these kinds of hard-hitting questions.
As Sarah said, the site that we are working on is similar to Stack Overflow, meaning it's a Q&A. Users ask a question, they get answers. This means that we already know what we're doing. We are not expecting our requirements to change much during development, if at all. This means we decide to use a modified waterfall process. We've done a lot of requirements gathering, we've done a lot of designing, and so we're moving on to implementation and testing soon. However, in case we run into any major problems, our modified waterfall process allows us to take a step back and look at what's wrong. Each step along the way, we've been verifying and validating to make sure there are no problems.
So I will preview what we will present about. First, Melissa is going to talk to us about the project requirements. Then Sam will cover quality assurance and risk analysis. We will do a prototype demonstration with Patrick, Sam, and myself, and then we will wrap it up with a conclusion and leave time for questions. So Melissa, why don't you start us off with some project requirements?
Okay, I'm going to talk about the main functional requirements for our project. So it's probably, I'm going to start with the high-level abstracts portion, which is divided into two different parts. And we tried to achieve three different goals for our functional requirements. The first of which is an intuitive user interface, which is easy to use and pretty self-explanatory. So there isn't really that much need for instruction on our part. The users can just jump right in and use it, and hopefully it'll be pretty easy to use. And we've divided our views into two different parts, private and public. And we have registered users who have access to both the public and the private portions. But we also have guest users who aren't registered, but who can view the website. But they can only view things which are public. So if something has been marked as private, nobody can view that unless they're registered. And all the registered users basically are treated the same. And the system will also implement a database on the back end, and we are going to use the model view controller, Microsoft MVC, to manipulate the data and the views.
Thank you for that, Melissa. Why don't we go into some more details about the essential functional requirements?
Thank you, Sarah. Well, it's pretty self-explanatory, and we're going to base the requirements on the use cases. And I think that there's going to be two portions. One is user registration and login, And this use case diagram shows that user registration and login portion. And the other, we're using an embedded document system for people to share files, like on the Q&A platform. And we're going to be using Crocodocs to do the embedded documents. And that's a little bit for that. And basically, we're going to have user profiles for each user, and they're going to have different kinds of functionality, but I mean, they're going to be able to ask questions and answer them, and to provide comments. And on each of those, it's probably going to be, they're going to be able to edit, have tags. Well, the questions are going to have tags, but other than that, the questions and answers are going to have the ability to edit them or to add comments to them. And we're also planning to implement a rating system so that the users can rate the questions and provide feedback on how they felt about a certain question or answer. So it's pretty similar to Stack Overflow.
So next are luxuries, basically stuff that would make the user experience better but are not required for our Q&A platform. The first would be messaging between users, like private messaging. We're not planning on implementing an instant messaging, so this would be email style, to where users can communicate if they want anonymously or just between each other with their names, and could potentially exchange contact information. They could also attach files to each message if they say, I like this person, I want them to take a look at this lesson tonight. We're also planning on tracking user contributions. Each question will say have a rating system. Say this is a good question and this is a good answer. We'll also have badges that say you've done a good thing or you're a good community member, such things. So one of the issues with the website is uptime, and because we are using Windows Azure as a server for our website, the Microsoft Service Agreement states that they have in excess of 99% uptime for all websites, which means that we are not expecting more than 5 minutes of downtime each week. This, on our end, however, we also have to make our system easily modifiable, as we're not expected to be the only ones who will necessarily be using it and editing it in the future. And of course, viewer levels will have to be changed based on login status. So our primary focus on quality assurance is with our coding standards. Basically, our first focus is self-explanatory variables. We don't want to cram up our view screens with too much code. For each method, maybe a block of code at the start, as you can see, explaining what the method does. If a line of code needs more explanation, a single line at the end of it, if absolutely necessary.
So the tools we'll be using are Visual Studio 2012, which will be our IDE. We're going to be using Model View Controller 5, which is provided by Visual Studio. We're using Windows Azure, which is going to be our server. And we are going to be using Team Foundation Service, which is our version control and issue tracking. The upside to using these four is that they're all fully integrated Microsoft products. So, for example, we can pull or update code to and from Team Foundation Service directly from Visual Studio, or publish our code directly to Azure from within Visual Studio. We're also going to be using SQL Server for our database, and we're going to be using Bootstrap, which is a set of HTML and CSS templates for an easy implemented user interface. For testing, we'll be doing unit testing, integration testing, system testing, and client acceptance testing. For unit testing, we're using Visual Studio's built-in unit testing. We might test certain methods like the login procedure or rating a question or an answer. For integration testing, we'll start piecing all the processes together, so we'll attach user profiles to questions and answers that they have asked or answered. You can track their post history, stuff like that. System testing, everything will be put together, everything should be working. We'll test our UI, make sure that it's all self-explanatory, it works as it's expected, the databases are being updated properly, and everything is working as should. And once we are satisfied with that, we'll send it off to our client, and if they're satisfied with it, then we'll product. Some risks that we've came up with, a big one might be improper use of tools. So since everything is integrated, it might be easy to say if we're coding for a couple hours, and we think that we update the code on Team Foundation service, and we exit out of everything, close everything. If we didn't actually update it, we could lose all that code. So that's a problem. Also, improper use of time management and team members not contributing enough, not pulling their weight. So ways that we mitigate around this is that we are constantly in contact with our client who is in Seattle. We meet with him weekly over Google Hangouts. We're constantly emailing each other, checking up on progress, making sure that we're doing everything that we assigned each other, and we've divided up the work even. Finally, we have to ask ourselves if we're giving ourselves too much to do. So for example, like the messaging system we have left for after if we finish everything else that we actually need for the system to function properly, and we'll add in later if we have time.
So for the basic site layout and functions, we will obviously have a register and login. Registering for the site requires an email, a username, a password, and verification that you get through your email. And we are going to let the user add their first name or last name or more personal information optionally once they log in. Then to view user information, the users will have the ability to implement privacy settings to dictate how much information they want others to see. We would like for this website to prioritize privacy and allow them to preserve their anonymity. And we will also give them, clearly the main goal is create and answer the questions, label them with tags that separate them into categories so we can use a search bar and you can type in lesson plan, and then all of the questions that have the keywords or the tags lesson plan will show up. And also, as we have discussed, file attachments. So this will facilitate the sharing of documents and files between faculty, staff, and anybody who uses this site. Now I will discuss the system block diagram. As we've mentioned that we are using MVC, which stands for Model View Controller. Here's our diagram. Over on the right we have our database, which communicates with our site model, and that is in order to update the information and get information that is put in by these users as they use it. The model communicates with the controller to decide what information to display, and the controller communicates with the view, and that updates what the user sees. The view is the HTML code, that's the content of the website itself. And the controller is controlled by the web browser that the users are using, such as Firefox or Chrome or Internet Explorer. And the user input is fed to the controller through the internet browser, and it goes through the system to keep itself constantly updated, and it provides separate things so nobody can mess up the database just from using the web browser. That's handled by the developers. Melissa, why don't you tell us about the database diagram?
Sure, Sarah. This is a database diagram that our client designed for us, and it's been designed using Microsoft SQL, and it has some relationships between it. Most of them are many-to-one relationships, so like you could have many answers to a question or many comments for an answer, or there's one relationship that's many-to-many that has to do with website roles. And I think that has to do with the username or user profile details. But other than that, the blocks show the relationships, and the ER diagram, those relationships are drawn.
All right. So now we have a demonstration to get to.
I'm just going to run through a couple of quick use cases. The first of which will be, well, it's Q&A platform, so I'm going to have them ask a question. So we're at the home page. We're going to assume that they're logged in. So, Sarah, do you want to ask a question?
Sure, I would love to ask a question. Okay, I just logged in. Now I want to ask a question. What a beautifully laid out site. That's a question. here we are. Title, Problem Student. What do I do about little Bobby Tables, who is messing up my classroom? He's the class clown. Please help. Now, I want to pose a question.
There's your text, which in text fields are working and her keyboard isn't. So, the question is, posted. As you can see, the site has updated, putting her question at the top in the most recent with no views, no answers, and no votes. All right, now, we mentioned user profile editing, which, you may not want to put anonymity and put stuff online, so we're going to keep this up here because we're going to be on the home page. So we're going to assume she's logged in again, so could you try and navigate to your user page?
Sure.
So you're now at your user page.
Why don't I edit my profile?
So now your profile's now in edit mode.
I'm going to tell people that I live in Washington so that I can get help from teachers in my area.
All right. For some reason, it specifically said you're in Ellensburg.
It's like it knew.
The NSA is watching you. All right. So, fields. All right. Your user profile has now been updated with your relevant information. Simple.
All right. Now we can actually show you a website that we have. Our client has published for us. Here's the basic template of our homepage.
All right, so this is very minimal, bare bones. This is provided to us by our client to get us started. So very basic home, some other stuff. It's all dummy information right now. So basic register page. You can create a username, give it a password. And later on, we'll also add boxes for email, which we'll require, and verification code. So now you're in. Right now, you can change your password and then log out, and then later on, log in. And there's that for now.
And a really nice feature about what we're using is it's very scalable. So if you want to access this site on your mobile, on the go, I tested it on my own phone. It looks really clean and really nice. So no matter what size it is, that's another thing that we really like about this feature. Sarah, why don't you finish us off?
Basically, wrap up, since we are using the waterfall method, our primary focus so far has been gathering requirements and getting our design down, and we feel we have gotten our design down enough to a point where we can begin properly implementing our Q&A and other features soon.
Thank you for your attention. Are there any questions? Dr. Holly Johnson.
I believe early in your presentation you mentioned that your UI is intuitive and easy to use. That being said, what provisions have you and or your client made for people who might have some kind of visual disability?
As of yet, none.
Or people who might have motor control or might be learning disabled? So are you assuming, and you and your client both assuming, that the universe that will be using this all has
I think that we've optimized it for all of the modern browsers, for like Firefox, IE, Google Chrome, and Safari, and like other than that, I guess we're just relying on the accessibility features of the operating system, like them, because like no one really has like that, I guess, that I know of, like accessibility features built into the website itself. But I mean, in order to make it more intuitive and easier to use, we're using the Bootstrap UI, so that should be.
But you bring up an excellent point, and we will be sure to run that by our client. Next question. I have a question for you guys. Is there another team after us to present?
Yes.
Are you supposed to go at 5:20?
That's all good.
I don't know. What do the authorities say about us? There's a lot of questions here.
Got 2 minutes.
Okay. Spencer.
So there's a service out there called a Stack Exchange, where Stack Overflow is part of it, but there's also other sites. Are you planning on integrating your project with that ecosystem, either using their technology or their authentication services? I mean, that would bring more people to your site, certainly. Have you guys thought about using Stack Exchange for that purpose?
We haven't considered it right now. What our client wants is something that it's going to be more of a closed system, because right now we require verification codes that will be obtained from our clients. So maybe in the future, but as for now, what our client wants for the first product is just not that.
But that's a good idea for the big and bright future. Derek.
What method are you using, or are you planning on using to sanitize the user input so that, for instance, people can't enter arbitrary JavaScript and have it execute for anybody to see it?
Well, we're planning to use developers' tools to sanitize our code so that we can protect things like cross-site scripting, SQL injection, but that's pretty much like implemented like on using into the tools that we're using, because we're using Microsoft.